Hello, dear friends. Today we are going to start from page 17. The topic is company vis-a-vis other forms of business. Though there are a number of similarities between a limited company and other forms of associations, there are a great number of dissimilarities as well. In the following paragraphs, a limited company is distinguished from a partnership firm, a Hindu undivided family business that is HUF, and a LLP. First is distinction between partnership firm and company. The principal points of distinction between a partnership firm and a company are as follows. A tabulated form is given. First is a point from the partnership firm and then company. So I'll be reading a point from the partnership firm and the point of distinction from the company point of view. First one. A partnership firm is not distinct from the several persons who form the partnership, whereas a company is a distinct legal person. In a partnership, the property of the firm is the property of the individuals comprising it, whereas in a company, it belongs to the company and not to the individuals who are its members. Next point in partnership firm, creditors of a partnership firm are creditors of individual partners and a decree against the firm can be executed against the partners jointly and severally, whereas the creditors of a company can proceed only against the company and not against its members. Partners are the agents of the firm. A partner can dispose of the property and incur liabilities as long as he acts in the course of the firm's business. Whereas in the case of a company, members of a company are not its agents. A member of a company cannot dispose of the property and incur liabilities in the course of the company's business. A partner cannot contract with his firm, whereas in a company, a member can contract with his company. A partner cannot transfer his shares and make the transferee a member of the firm without the consent of other partners, whereas a company's share can ordinarily be transferred. A partner's liability is always unlimited, whereas in case of the company, the liability of shareholders may be limited either by shares or a guarantee. The death or insolvency of a partner dissolves the firm unless otherwise provided. A company has perpetual succession, that is, the death or insolvency of a shareholder or all of them does not affect the life of the company. Next point, the accounts of a firm are audited at the discretion of the partners, whereas in a company it is required to have its audited or accounts audited annually by a chartered accountant. The last point, a partnership firm on the other hand is the result of an agreement and can be dissolved at any time by agreement among the partners, whereas a company being a creation of law can only be dissolved as laid down by law. The next topic is distinction between a Hindu undivided family business and a company. A Hindu undivided family business consists of homogeneous members since it consists of members of the joint family itself, whereas a company may consist of homogeneous or heterogeneous members. In a Hindu undivided family business, the Karta has the sole authority to contract debts for the purposes of the business. Other co-partners cannot do so. There is no such system in a company. A person becomes a member of a Hindu undivided family business by virtue of birth. There is no provision to that effect in the company. No registration is compulsory for carrying on business for gain by a Hindu undivided family, even if the number of members exceeds 20. There is a case law that is given, Shyamlal Roy versus Madhusudan Roy. Registration of a company is compulsory. Next is distinction between limited liability partnership, that is LLP, and a company. LLP is an alternative corporate business form that gives the benefit of limited liability of a company and the flexibility of partnership. LLP can continue its existence irrespective of change in partners. It is capable of entering into contracts and holding property in its own name. LLP is a separate legal entity, is liable to the full extent of its assets, but liability of the partners is limited to their agreed contribution in the LLP. Further, no partner is liable on account of the independent or unauthorized actions of the other partners. Thus, individual partners are shielded from joint liability created by another partner's wrongful business decisions or misconduct. Mutual rights and duties of the partners within a LLP are governed by an agreement between the partners or between the partners and the LLP, as the case may be. The LLP, however, is not relieved of the liability for its other obligations as a separate entity. Since LLP contains elements of both a corporate structure as well as a partnership firm structure, LLP is called a hybrid between a company and a partnership. LLP is a body corporate and a legal entity separate from its members, having perpetual succession. LLP form is a form of business model which is organized and operates on the basis of an agreement, provides flexibility without imposing detailed legal and procedural requirements, and 3. enables professional or technical expertise and initiative to combine with financial risk-taking capacity in an innovative and efficient manner. A basic difference between an LLP and a company lies in that the internal governance structure of a company is regulated by statute, that is Companies Act, whereas an LLP, it would be a contractual agreement between the partners. The management ownership divide inherent in a company is not there in a limited liability partnership. LLP have more flexibility as compared to a company. LLP have lesser compliance requirements as compared to a company. Doctrine of lifting off or piercing the corporate veil. That is our next topic. The separate personality of a company is a statutory privilege and it must be used for legitimate business purposes only. Where a fraudulent and dishonest use is made of the legal entity, the individuals concerned will not be allowed to take shelter behind the corporate personality. The court will break through the corporate shell and apply the principle or doctrine of what is called as lifting off or piercing the corporate veil. The court will look behind the corporate entity and take action as though no entity separate from the members existed and make the members of the controlling persons liable for debts and obligations of the company. The corporate veil is lifted when in defense proceedings, such as for the evasion of tax, an entity relies on its corporate personality as a shield to cover its wrongdoings. Janardhan Mohandas Rajan Pillai case is given as an example. However, the shareholders cannot ask for the lifting of the veil for their purposes. This was held in Premlata Bhatia versus Union of India, wherein the premises of a shop were allotted on a license to the individual licensee. She set up a wholly owned private company and transferred the premises to that company without the government consent. She could not remove the illegality by saying that she and her company were virtually the same person. Statutory recognition for lifting of corporate veil. The Companies Act 2013 itself contains some provisions like subsection 7 of section 7, subsection 1 of section 251 and section 339, which lift the corporate veil to reach the real forces of action. Subsection 7 of section 7 deals with punishment for incorporation of company by furnishing false information. Subsection 1 of section 251 deals with liability for making fraudulent application for removal of name of company from the register of companies. And section 339 deals with liability for fraudulent conduct of business during the course of winding up. Lifting of corporate veil under judicial interpretation. Ever since the decision in Salomon versus Salomon and Company Limited, normally courts are reluctant or at least very cautious to lift the veil of corporate personality to see the real persons behind it. Nevertheless, courts have found it necessary to disregard the separate personality of a company in the following situations. A. Where the corporate veil has been used for commission of fraud or improper conduct. In such a situation, courts have lifted the veil and looked at the realities of the situation. Case example, in Jones versus Lipman. A agreed to sell certain land to B. Pending completion of formalities of the said deal, A sold and transferred the land to a company which he had incorporated with a nominal capital of £100, and of which he and a clerk were the only shareholders and directors. This was done in order to escape a decree for specific performance in a suit brought by B. The court held that the company was the creature of A and a mass to avoid recognition, and that in the eyes of equity, A must complete the contract since he had the full control of the limited company in which the property was vested and in a position to cause the contract in question to be fulfilled. Point B. Where a corporate facade is really only an agency instrumentality. Case example, in Reply RG Films Limited. An American company produced a film in India, technically in the name of a British company, 90% of whose capital was held by the president of the American company, which financed the production of the film. Board of Trade refused to register the film as a British film, which stated that English company acted merely as the nominee of the American corporation. Point C. Where the conduct conflicts with public policy, courts lifted the corporate veil for protecting the public policy. In Corners Brothers versus Corners, this is a case example that is given. The principle was applied against the managing director who made use of his position contrary to public policy. In this case, the House of Lords determined the character of the company as enemy company since the person who were de facto in control of its affairs were residents of Germany, which was at war with England at that time. The alien company was not allowed to proceed with the action as that would have meant giving money to the enemy, which was considered as monstrous and against public policy. Point D. Further, in Daimler Company Limited versus Continental Tire and Rubber Company, it was held that a company will be regarded as having enemy character if the persons having de facto control of its affairs are resident in an enemy country or wherever they may be are acting under instructions from or on behalf of the enemy. Point D. Where it was found that the sole purpose for which the company was formed was to evade taxes, the court will ignore the concept of separate entity and make the individuals concerned liable to pay the taxes which they would have paid but for the formation of the company. Case example, Sir Dinshaw Manekji Petit. The facts of the case are that the SSE was a wealthy man enjoying large dividend and interest income. He formed 4 private companies and agreed with each to hold a block of investment as an agent for it. Income receipt was credited in the accounts of the company, but the company handed back the amount to him as a pretended loan. This way, he divided his income in 4 parts in a bid to reduce his tax liability. But it was held the company was formed by the SSE purely and simply as a means of avoiding super tax, and the company was nothing more than the SSE himself. It did no business but was created simply as a legal entity to ostensibly receive the dividends and interest and to hand them over to the SSE as pretended loans. The court decided to disregard the corporate entity as it was being used for tax evasion. The next is a famous Vodafone case, one of the most recent and also a landmark case of the Supreme Court in its decision in the case of Vodafone International Holdings BV versus Union of India and another. In judgment, the Supreme Court set aside the Bombay High Court's judgment directing Vodafone International Holdings BV to pay 110 billion rupees as withholding tax in a transaction that took place offshore. The facts, as briefly put, are that in May 2007, Vodafone Incorporated in the Netherlands acquired from Hong Kong-based Hutchison Group the entire share capital of CGP Investments Holdings Limited, a company incorporated in the Cayman Islands, which in turn controlled a 67% interest in Hutchison SR Limited, Hutchison's Indian mobile service businesses. The Indian income tax authorities contended that capital gains were made by Hutchison in India and that Vodafone was therefore liable to pay withholding tax thereon, amounting to approximately 110 billion rupees. That is, the sale price being US dollars 11.2 billion. Vodafone challenged the tax demand in the Bombay High Court, which ruled in favor of the income tax authorities, holding that the essence of the transaction was a change in the controlling interest in HEL, that is Hutchison SR Limited, which constituted a source of income in India. Vodafone appealed to the Supreme Court, which overruled the High Court and held that the transaction fell outside India's territorial tax jurisdiction and hence non-taxable. The judgment was not only important in the context of taxation but also covers other issues of corporate law. One of these is in the context of the principle of the corporate veil and the circumstances under which it may be lifted, particularly in the context of commercial cross-border transactions and tax avoidance. The court recognized the fundamental principle of the corporate veil by noting that the approach of both the corporate and tax laws, particularly in the matter of corporate taxation, generally is founded on the above mentioned separate entity principle, that is, treat a company as a separate person. The Indian Income Tax Act 1961 in the matter of corporate taxation is founded on the principle of the independence of companies and other entities subject to income tax. It is observed in the context of parent or subsidiary relationship that it is generally accepted that the group parent company would give guidance to group subsidiaries, but that by itself would not justify piercing the veil or imply that the subsidiaries are to be deemed residents of the state in which the parent company resides, and that a subsidiary and its parent are totally distinct taxpayers. 6 factors that may be considered to determine whether a transaction is a bogus and whether in a specific case the corporate veil may be lifted are: 1. The concept of participation in investment. 2. The duration of time during which the holding structure exists. 3. The period of business operation in India. 4. The generation of taxable revenues in India. 5. The timing of the exit. And 6. The continuity of business on such exit. In the final analysis, the Supreme Court decided against lifting the corporate veil in Vodafone as the tax authorities failed to establish that the transaction was a bogus or tax avoidance scheme. Point F. Avoidance of welfare legislation is as common as avoidance of taxation, and the approach in considering problems arising out of such avoidance has necessarily to be the same, and therefore where it was found that the sole purpose for the formation of the new company was to use it as a device to reduce the amount to be paid by way of bonus to workmen, the Supreme Court upheld the piercing of the veil to look at the real transaction. The case example under point F is the workmen employed in Associated Rubber Industries Limited Bhavnagar versus the Associated Rubber Industries Limited Bhavnagar and another. The facts of the case were that a new company was created wholly by the principal company with no assets of its own except those transferred to it by the principal company, with no business or income of its own except receiving dividends from shares transferred to it by the principal company, that is only for the purpose of splitting the profits into 2 hands and thereby reducing the obligation to pay bonus. The Supreme Court of India held that the new company was formed as a device to reduce the gross profits of the principal company and thereby reduce the amount to be paid by way of bonus to workmen. The amount of dividends received by the new company should therefore be taken into account in assessing the gross profit of the principal company. G. Another instance of corporate veil arrived at by the court arose in Kapila Hingorani versus State of Bihar. Let us see the case. In this case, the petitioner had alleged that the state of Bihar had not paid salaries to its employees in PSUs, etc. for long periods, resulting in starvation deaths. But the respondent took the stand that most of the undertakings were incorporated under the provisions of the Companies Act 1956. Hence, the rights etc. of the shareholders should be governed by the provisions of the Companies Act, and the liabilities of the PSUs should not be passed on to the state government by resorting to the doctrine of lifting the corporate veil. The court observed that the state may not be liable in relation to the day-to-day functioning of the PSUs, but its liability would arise on its failure to perform the constitutional duties and the functions of those undertakings. It is so because life means something more than mere ordinal existence. The inhibition against the deprivation of life extends to all those limits and faculties by which life is enjoyed. Point H, which is the last point, where it is found that a company has abused its corporate personality for an unjust and inequitable purpose, the court would not hesitate to lift the corporate veil. Further, the corporate veil could be lifted when acts of a corporation are allegedly opposed to justice, convenience, and interest of revenue or workmen, or are against public interest. Thus, in appropriate cases, the courts disregard the separate corporate personality and look behind the legal person or lift the corporate veil. Use of corporate veil for hiding criminal activities. Where the defendant used the corporate structure as a device or facade to conceal its criminal activities, that is, evasion of customs and excise duties payable by the company, the court could lift the corporate veil and treat the assets of the company as the realizable property of the shareholder. For example, in a case, there was a prima facie case that the defendants controlled the two companies. The companies had been used for the fraudulent evasion of excise duty on a large scale. The defendant regarded the companies as carrying on a family business and that they had benefited from companies' cash in substantial amounts, and further no useful purpose would have been served by involving the companies in the criminal proceedings. In all these circumstances, it was therefore appropriate to lift the corporate veil and treat the stock in the company's warehouses and the company's motor vehicles as realizable property held by the defendants. The court said that the excise department is not to be criticized for not charging the companies. The more complex commercial activities become, the more vital it is for prosecuting authorities to be selective in whom and what they charge, so that issues can be presented in a clear and short form as possible. In the present case, it seemed that no useful purpose would have been served by initiating criminal proceedings. H and others. With this, we come to the end of this session of audiobook. In the next session, we'll be hearing the topic Applicability of Companies Act 2013 and key concepts. Thank you. Stay safe.